we have a next speaker who's going to join us. He has been part of the WordPress community since 2006, and he's joining us from Vienna, Austria, which, funny enough, not funny enough, awesome enough, it's the world's most livable city, and also Eurovision champs, so if you're into Eurovision. So today, thanks, I got one laugh over there. The talk today for Alex is he's going to show us what you're missing if you don't have your own WordPress. So this talk is all about the freedom of WordPress gives you. Not just the 4 freedoms of GPL, but the everyday kind. So the freedom to store your memories, to share with your family, and to build a space that's truly yours. So please help me give a warm welcome to Alex Kirk.
Thank you. All right. WordPress is just software for blogs. WordPress is just a CMS. OK, WordPress can also be a shop. But who still here has a WordPress blog? Kind of matches this graph. Blogging is not as prominent as it was. And who still visits their own, or who visits their own WordPress every day? I mean, why should you? It's your own WordPress. But today I want to show you how you can use WordPress for your own benefit as a Mastodon instance of your own. A place to store bookmarks and read it later and notes. Or how it can be your private space for family and friends and clubs. I think there's something that people kind of get a bit wrong with WordPress. Or like the default is that with WordPress, you have to publish something to the world. But actually, you can modify WordPress so that you can just share it with the people you want, and that those might only be yourself. So to use WordPress as your own lightweight Mastodon instance, it works like this. So when you think of social media, there's centralized and decentralized social media. And social media that is centralized, how would you use it? Typically, they're owned by a company, and a company like Facebook or Instagram, or Meta in the background, or Twitter. So you would install an app, go to the website, sign up, and then connect with others. In the decentralized world, there's no one company, but instead there's a protocol that people have agreed on to use. So examples would be Mastodon, or PixelFed, or Friendica. So you would install an app and go to which website, and then you have to choose a server, which one, and only then you can connect to others. But people get tripped up by this finding the right place to go. So taking a step back, the consumption of digital content works in a centralized way. Those companies, they make their own rules. So they want to keep you on the website so that they make more money using ads. And they do that by showing you stuff that you didn't subscribe for. I mean, it works. Everybody stays longer on those apps than they wanted. And something else that they do is that they, because they make the rules, they also make sure that only when you are on their website you can get there. So they create a walled garden. So what can you do there? A nerd would say use a feed reader. But these days, feed readers are not as useful anymore because there is fewer RSS feeds around. And the social networks don't have RSS either. They want to keep you there. They want you to go there. But your own WordPress is an alternative. You can combine the feeds, those that remain on the web, with Mastodon and Bluesky. So you are in control of the algorithm, what you're being shown. And you have new ways to consume the content. And for those, you need a couple of plugins. So the ActivityPub plugin is the one that implements the protocol ActivityPub, which powers the Fediverse. So there are different equivalents in the ActivityPub world to a centralized network. So for example, Twitter or X, is equal to Mastodon. Instagram would have PixelFed, YouTube, PeerTube, Facebook has Friendica as a similar service, and even Reddit has Lemmy as a distributed service using ActivityPub. One important difference between typical social networks and using the ActivityPub plugin is that you're not sharing a link to your post that you did, but instead the post is being distributed to the people who subscribe you. So your WordPress is actually a part of the network. It's not just a place that is kind of external and you might go there from the network. And because it's push-based, the content goes into the network and comes back pretty much instantly. And even if you don't go as far as I'm going to show you, the ActivityPub plugin is useful for any site because RSS is kind of limited to a certain degree, and ActivityPub is a bit of an evolution to that. So I really recommend you trying it. So in practice, as soon as you have that plugin installed, your WordPress can be followed using ActivityPub. So on the Mastodon site, you would enter the URL, and then you can follow them. But what happens if somebody then on Mastodon replies to that post? Well, it arrives as a comment on that post on your WordPress. And if you reply to that comment, what happens then? It arrives as a reply on Mastodon. So people can stay in Mastodon and interact with your post on your WordPress. And that brings back the interactivity to your comment section of a WordPress. So that's already a big plus. But if we go further and take the Friends plugin, it's responsible for subscribing to other people. So ActivityPub was for people to subscribe to you, so your followers. And this is for your following. You can subscribe, first of all, to RSS feeds. And for those feeds, you can even receive the comments and reply to them and so on. You can get email notifications. And with the ActivityPub plugin, you can then be followed. You can then follow people on Mastodon or Bluesky via a bridge. So this is what the Friends plugin looks like. You have the feed of everything that you've subscribed. And here you can actually see that there is different content coming in. So some things are coming via RSS. Some things are coming via ActivityPub. And it uses post formats. And the status post format would be for the ActivityPub items, and the standard one for RSS items. One of the differences is that things coming in via Mastodon, they don't have a title. And if you don't like this mix, you can also select to only view like a single post format. So for example, for images, you would have a view like this. So if I wanted to follow the WordCamp Europe, I would enter the URL here and be sent to the Add a New Friend page. We'll then see which feeds are available. In this case, there is an RSS feed. And I can follow them. And now their feed is being fetched. This then looks like this on the front plane. And I can take a look at the post, next post, and so on. Now, let's go to one more plugin. It's called Enable Mastodon Apps. And this solves one of the things that make social apps really interesting, is that there are so many apps that make it really nice to use. So it allows to use apps that were actually designed for Mastodon with your WordPress. So it does this by pretending to be Mastodon. It implements the same API that Mastodon implements for their apps. So it's a bit of a hack. But it works well enough. And the concepts of Mastodon and WordPress match surprisingly well. And there are a few workarounds necessary for things, how they work in Mastodon. But in general, most of the bugs, I think, have been found by now and fixed. So if you only have this plugin installed, the timeline in the Mastodon apps would show just the posts from your blog. And direct messages could be sent between users on your WordPress. And that makes a lot of sense when you have like one blog where many people post, and you are interested in the content that other people post. Which would be the case, for example, for family, or for friends, or for a club, where multiple people are involved. So if you now combine these 3 plugins, the timeline will actually be similar to a Mastodon, all your friends' posts. Direct messages can be sent between you and people on Mastodon. And therefore, it acts like a real Mastodon instance, which, if you have ever tried to install a real Mastodon, it's a huge pain because the software stack is really extensive. So if we, oops, sorry. There we go. One back. This one. All right. So if it starts, maybe let's go back one more. Sorry. All right. Now, so this is a web app for Mastodon called Elk. And as you can see, there's the posts in there. There's the mentions. You can see the conversations, which are direct messages. You can have favorites and bookmarks, and they all appear here. You can post through the Mastodon app, and you have your own profile there. And here's another app that's called FanPy, and they have the concept of boosts being separated from the content, which can be a quite interesting experience. And of course, it's the same posts again, and you can go through the UI, and there's like the mentions, notifications, and so on, your profile. And if you go back to the notifications, you can actually see that there is this announcement here. And this shows that it comes from your own WordPress. And you can go to the settings. And what I'm going to do now is change this from just the status posts to the standard posts. So now if I go back to the FanPy app and refresh the page, this is now my RSS reader, because it only shows the posts that come in via RSS. So if we look at the Mastodon apps page here, you can see the variety that exists of apps that you could use. So there's for any thinkable platform. And for the demo reasons here, I'll show it on the web. There's the Pinafore app, for example, and this is the flow. I enter the URL of my own blog. I see the authorized screen. And then it returns me to the app, and I can see all the posts that are on my WordPress inside this app. Same content everywhere. And even search works. So you can search for any content in your own WordPress. It also works for mobile apps, or in this case, an app that works on macOS and iOS, Ivory. So it gets a bit boring. It's the same content, but you can choose from so many apps to whatever apps you like. So I see it as a bit of a missing gap that WordPress has in the apps ecosystem. There are so many apps to choose from now. All right, when talking about Bluesky, it's this Twitter on a new protocol basis. Many people have gone there. And while they promise to stay open and add federation, the protocol, it's so much more complicated that they seem to have a bit of a hard time to make it really federated. And there's also no WordPress plugin compatible with Bluesky with the protocol. But there exists a bridge that can be used by ActivityPub, and thus is compatible with all of this. So on the Bridgefed homepage, it tells you that you need to follow this account on ActivityPub, and then use direct messages to talk to it. So here I can then say I want to follow this person, or I want to change my URL to this URL, and so on. And this is a visualization of how all of this works. So if I post something, it goes out via the ActivityPub plugin in my WordPress to all the people that follow me. And if somebody else posts, it goes to their followers, plus via the Friends plugin into my WordPress, and then via the Mastodon apps to the apps that I want to use. So there's one thing that I think why WordPress makes a lot of sense. It's a place where there's no algorithms. Nobody else makes the rules. So you only see what you subscribe to. Maybe it doesn't feed the dopamine urge that you want to have, but I think it's actually pretty healthy. So there's only the blogs that you have subscribed to, only the posts from the Fediverse that you have subscribed to. And the bonus of using WordPress for this is that you don't have to choose a Mastodon server, which is something that people struggle with. And also you get a nice email, a nice account there. You have username at your domain. And I would like to make this comparison with the food pyramid. The digital consumption, you also have the addictive stuff. You know, the sweets, the things that you shouldn't be using all the time. And you have fun stuff. And you have things that, you know, are without algorithms. And maybe the basis should be everything that you do research on. So maybe that could be a bit of a reminder to think about your own consumption. All right, using WordPress as a personal read it later tool, or bookmarking tool, or note-taking tool. How does it work? So, you know, Pocket just shut down, so WordPress can be a pretty good alternative to this. So you can save articles from the web with full content, and as soon as they are in your WordPress, you can actually edit them if you need to, and archive them, and utilize them in different ways. So you would use these plugins for it. And so the Friends plugin is a bit of the UI basis. And the Post Collection plugin is the one that will save the page from the web for you. So it can download the articles from a URL via a bookmarklet or a browser extension, or you just provide a URL. And if you use the extension or the bookmarklet, it will actually take the content of the page that you're viewing. So if it's like a paid article, you can still save it. And as soon as it's in your WordPress, it's fully searchable. So for me, it often happens that I remember I read something somewhere, and then I just have to search in my own WordPress because I read it there. And a small bonus for when you're subscribed to a feed that only provides an excerpt, you will also get the full content, because after the feed item is received, it will then fetch the content automatically. So this is how it works. Let's say I want to save this article, so I use the extension to save it to the collected posts in my blog. And then the text is received there. And as you can see there, something happened with the image. So I'm going to go into the edit mode and switch back and copy the image link, and then just use Gutenberg to add an image, insert the URL, and now the picture is there. And here it's back in the front end. Just a reminder, you can modify those posts to your liking, but you shouldn't republish them. It's, you know, maybe there's some legislations where it is OK, but in general, I would say for your personal use, just keep it to yourself. So let's save another article, this one about an LLM. So it arrives here, and now I've got 2 articles here. So I personally, I'm actually not a big fan of reading long articles on screen. So there's one more thing. You can send it to your e-reader. So reading on an e-reader screen is something that I prefer to reading on a front-lit screen. So I worked on this app so that you can download it like this. So those articles will appear as chapters in one book. And on Kindle and Pocketbook, you can just receive them directly to your device via email. And if you don't have that, then you can download it from the e-reader using a web interface. So in WordPress, you can then manage your different e-readers, should you have one or more. And in this case, you will need to take note of this URL. You will have a download password. And then you put this in your e-reader. I put it as a bookmark here, so then when I go to the page, I can now see the articles that are on my, in my read later list, so to speak, and download them as an ebook. So now, this is the book on the e-reader. And this is the table of contents with the 2 articles. So there's a chapter select. I can switch to the next article if I want. And the images are offline, so I can read them even when I'm not near an internet connection. For taking notes, I recommend the Personal OS plugin. It started off as a note-taking tool inside WordPress. So a WordPress post would be your notes, and you can organize it in notebooks and to-dos. And because it's called Personal OS, it kind of evolved into the system that has OpenAI integration and so on, however deep you want to go in there. And for example, it has Readwise or Evernote sync. So this is what it looks like. It has its own post type, note, and you can store your notes there. So you have an overview of the notes, you edit them in Gutenberg, and you can organize them in notebooks. Finally, using WordPress as a private space for friends, families, and clubs. The first step is to protect the site from the outside, to install a private site plugin. So it's a plugin that restricts access to it, only to logged in people. And it protects content like posts, pages, or other custom post types. But it should also protect the REST API or feeds so that the content doesn't get out that way. And as soon as you take this more seriously, you might have multiple sites. So using a multi-site is a pretty big bonus here. So a use case that I would recommend to use is to actually do deliberate blogging as a replacement to messengers. So if you send a message to a group, for example, a family group, you could think, could this be also a post on a private blog? One reason that I think it makes sense is because when do you really go back to old messages? Typically, it's lost in the back scroll. So with these plugins, you can do that. And I have a little bit of a philosophical side note. I think that we're all drowning in too many pictures. We're taking too many pictures, and they're all lost in the Apple and Google picture libraries. And we know we should clean them up, but instead we pay a little bit more to keep all of them. So what if we instead created blog posts and not only kept the pictures, but also the stories that go with the pictures? And then, with the right plugin, you can then revisit them. And I think, generally, like long term, I think this is a better solution. All right, so with the Enable Mastodon apps, as a bonus, you kind of can provide a really good interface to all the people who are involved. They can use a nice social UI for the content that you're collecting together. You can use the DMs to message between the WordPress users. And with the Years Ago Today plugin, it will actually resurface the old pictures that you have done so many years ago. So for example, this would be a blog of a family. And if you take a look at this in the Mastodon apps, it looks like a social service, but it's only for the people involved. Another use case that I think has an interesting use is to have your own private Wikipedia. I keep my family history of my extended family in a WordPress. So each relative, like on Wikipedia, has their own page. And for living relatives, you can have like their birthday, the birth dates, wedding dates, whatever, contact info, and funny anecdotes from that person. For a club, that could be a knowledge base. Typically, you would have to find another wiki software and install it, but you can also use WordPress for this. The plugin that I would suggest for this is called FamilyWiki. And this is an example of a page for one person, or for one dog in this case. And yeah, using custom fields, you have the different data points, and that's all compiled with a shortcode. And that also gives you like a birthday calendar for your family. So, recapping this, I think WordPress is underutilized for personal use. And I suggest everybody to try it, maybe even again if you already did before. So use it as your own Mastodon instance, a read it later notes or bookmark tool, or as a private space for family, friends, and clubs. You can find this presentation and more links at this address. I'll give you a bit of time to take screenshots, photos if you want. Cool, thank you.